Good morning. Thank you for joining this webinar. I hope we're going to have a very insightful and interesting 1.5 hours. This seminar is on public sector performance and reporting and the Sustainable Development Goals, a new area of development with lots and lots of concepts and ideas around it, and lots of different frameworks and areas of consideration for future development. And we're privileged today here to have 3 very eminent speakers to help us through and navigate through the day. We have Carol Adams, a professor of accounting at Durham University, Carolyn, I hope I pronounce it appropriately, Pontoppidan, associate professor at the Copenhagen Business School, and Katarina Bryan, who's the head of a private office of Eva Lemsom, who's the Swedish member of the European Court of Auditors. All of them have a very impressive track record in doing work in this field, and I'm hoping that you will get significant feedback on I hope you can get significant feedback on this area from them. So without further ado, I would like to start with Carol. She's a professor of accounting, Carol, at the Durham University. She's done some award-winning work on the area of sustainability reporting, and no less has been a technical expert for the United Nations Development Programme, looking at SDGs impact. And she's immediate past chair of the Global Reporting Initiative Stakeholder Council. So I think her credentials speak for themselves. And I'm going to ask Carol to now start her presentation.
Thank you very much, Khaled. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to share some of my work with you, some work I've done myself, and some of the work I've done with the UNDP's SDG impact team. Next slide, please. These are 3 publications that I've been working on over the last few years. They're all published by the International Integrated Reporting Council, so you'll find them on their website, integratedreporting.org. So the first one talks about how you can integrate thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals into your organization and decision-making processes. And the one on the right is a set of recommendations for SDG disclosures. Next slide, please. So the SDG disclosures, the document on the left there, the blue one, included this octopus diagram. So those of you who know the IR framework will have seen this before. And what I did here was try and show the influence of the capitals on the SDGs. So the idea is that you need these multiple capitals for your business model. And through the process of transforming the capitals to create value, you're actually having an impact, positive or negative, on particular SDGs. And that then feeds into the availability of capitals, particularly natural capital and social capital, back into the business model. And the idea is that you're thinking about sustainable development issues, the risks and opportunities arising from sustainable development issues through the business model, through thinking about strategy, risks, resource planning, and also the outputs, the products or services that you're delivering as well, and adapting those to take account of these sustainable development risks and opportunities. Next slide, please. Now, the document on the right, the SDG disclosure recommendations, divides the disclosures into 4 themes. Now, strategy here is right at the middle. The idea being that disclosing on your strategy and thinking about your strategy, disclosing that process of developing strategy, how you incorporate sustainable development risks and opportunities is critical to achieving the SDGs. You've got to change what you're doing in some respects to contribute to the sustainable development goals, and also be able to continue to create value in the long term. And around that, you've got a management approach, for example, to stakeholder engagement. You're setting performance and targets. And through all of those three themes, you've got governance oversight. And that is really critical also to change, to get the governing body involved in overseeing all these different activities. Next slide, please. The SDGs recommendations include three fundamental concepts. This idea that you're creating value long-term for organizations and society, and that achieving the SDGs is critical to your ability to create value in the long term. And so the definition of materiality there is a sort of a combination of thinking about both long-term value creation for society and also having a positive impact on contribution to the sustainable development goals. So you need to think about material positive and negative impacts there, so that you can you know, feed back into the business model sufficient natural capital, and you've got the social capital there to be able to continue what you're doing. Next slide, please. Now, the work I've been doing with the SDG Impact Team at the United Nations Development Programme has involved working on the development of these SDG impact standards for private equity bonds and enterprises. The sort of final version of the private equity is about to be released soon. The bonds will be going out for a second public consultation period soon. And the SDG impact standards for enterprises, which is any kind of organization, will be going out to for their first consultation in October. And if you could put the next slide on, please. These SDG impact standards are standards for the sort of processes going on within your organization. They're not reporting standards. They're a decision-making framework, but they've used the same 4 themes that I used in the SDGs recommendations to structure the standards. So, you know, there's indicators on what you do to think about your strategy, what you need to do to make sure that you're considering sustainable development issues and working towards having a positive impact on the achievement of the SDGs, for example. And if we could go to the next slide, please. You'll see that the nice colored diagram there, the large one, is almost identical to the one that we used in the SDGs recommendations. So this is, again, putting strategy right at the center with governance oversight over all of these processes. And the transparency section of the enterprise standards will be referring organizations to the SDGs recommendations, which have already been published. They were published earlier this year to fulfill the transparency requirement of the SDG impact standards. Next slide, please. And this slide just shows the interrelationship between the SDGs impact standards, and the orange arrows there indicate that it's a sort of a continual improvement process. So the idea is it doesn't really matter where you start. You can use these UNDP SDG impact standards to inform your approach to the SDGs through a continual improvement process. Next slide, please. And then just a little comment on some research I've been doing, because really central to all of this is the need to think about sustainable development risks and opportunities and incorporate them into strategy. And the risks, reporting of even large multinational companies is woefully inadequate, and for all types of organizations need to be considerably improved. So my colleague Subhash Abhaya-Wansa and I looked at the climate change and pandemic risks for organizations which are impacted by both. And we looked at the world's largest airlines, 5 largest cruise ships, 5 hotel companies, and found that only, I think it was 4 of these 20 large organizations which have been significantly hit by the pandemic actually said anything about pandemic risk in any of their reporting, whether that be their annual report, their sustainability report, and so on. And in fact, they didn't do much better on climate change either. The purple rows there indicate reporting on physical climate change risks. So you can see only 15% of these highly impacted large organizations, the largest in the world, reported anything on the physical risks arising, like difficulty of accessing natural resources and travel destinations becoming unattractive because of climate change, weather issues. So, you know, this is climate change. When you think about the risks from the other SDGs, they're obviously getting even less attention. And it's absolutely critical that all types of organizations, whether it be public sector or private sector, are starting to think about these risks. Next slide, please. And this just shows the bits of the existing frameworks, the SDGs recommendations drew on. So we weren't reinventing the wheel. We were drawing on the bits of the IR framework, the GRI standards, and the TCFD recommendations that are really critical to the SDGs and thinking about sustainable development risks and opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I just wanted to, my enthusiasm at the beginning of the presentation, I forgot to tell all the attendees that in the scroll bar on you have an area that says questions. So please feel free to ask any questions during the 3 presentations, and we will try, and we have some time at the end for asking the questions to the panelists. Just one question from my side, Carol, in terms of your presentation. It's interesting how you're integrating a lot of different ideas into your processes. The one thing that strikes me that I've not seen anyone else try to do before is the concept of materiality that you're bringing into the reporting. And from an accounting point of view, that's something we're familiar with. But do you want to just say what the consequences of bringing that materiality concept into the framework is for people who may not be?
Yes, that's a very good question, Khalid, and thank you for raising it. You know, there's a lot of talk about these reporting standards and, you know, trying to bring them together and harmonize them. And I think also quite a few vested interests. And we're still hearing talk about economic value creation and financial materiality. And that is just not going to cut it for the longer, in the longer term. In order to be able to achieve sustainable development, which is critical for the survival of the people on the planet, never mind organizations, we need to rethink what value creation is. And I think, you know, the public sector has an opportunity to lead the way here, because you don't just make decisions based on economic criteria. And, you know, I don't think any organization ought to be doing that, because it doesn't serve you in the longer term. Really, for long-term success of any organization, we really need to be thinking about value creation much more broadly than just economic value creation. It's about value creation for society, broadly speaking.
Thank you, and I'm sure there'll be some more questions coming later on. So if I can move on to our second presenter, Carolyn. Carolyn is from the Copenhagen Business School. She has a PhD in accounting, and has been involved with the United Nations, amongst other organisations, for many years in her research. And her research interest really spans the areas of governance, global public sector reporting, and sustainability reporting, which obviously takes us into this realms of moving it into the SDG realms. And I think some of the interesting work she's done, and I'm sure she will provide some insights in, is about linking the SDGs with integrated reporting, which is a very technical process that's going on from the accounting research world. And she's also working around public and private sectors. So I think, Carolyn, if you would like to take us through your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me. And it's of course a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about, I'm going to see if I can change slide. There we go. A small study that we initiated in the spring of 2020, and it came out of an interest moving into the area of sustainability reporting in the public sector, and more specifically in municipalities. And this, what I'm going to present to you today, is actually a phase 1 of a pilot project that we are currently working on extending and also expanding both the research scope and the research questions. So at the very end of this presentation, I'm going to get into that. So I've structured this presentation as such that I will start by giving you a small introduction to municipalities in this particular case country, which is Sweden. I'm then going to touch upon this divide of mandatory and voluntary reporting that we see in sustainability reporting. At least within the European Union, we have some mandatory requirements that primarily hit the private sector through the non-financial reporting directive. And then we have a host of voluntary standards, and we saw the key ones presented in Carol's presentation. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this data sample that is used for this presentation and the aim of the project. And then at the end, we're of course going to arrive at what can we extrapolate from this pilot study. So the public sector in Sweden. The public sector in Sweden is organized into 2 main levels. So we have a central level and a local level. And the local level is then further divided into 2 different administrative systems. We have county councils and we have municipalities. And across the country, we have 290 municipalities. And the average number of inhabitants is about 31,000. And I should say that our country is geographically very large, and we see a large variation both in terms of nature, climate, and density of the population in these municipalities, where some are large cities with high density naturally. Changing slide. Let's see. There we go. So the municipalities are responsible for local public issues in the immediate environment of the citizens. So they provide preschool activities, primary, secondary schools, care of elderly, water, sewage, and so forth. And the municipalities are run by elected bodies known as town councils, and they're composed of politicians who are directly elected by the citizens every 4th year, with the elections taking place at the same time of the general parliamentary elections. So now I'm getting more close to the scope of this pilot project that I'm presenting. So the purpose of this study was to examine and analyze how has sustainability reporting evolved over time across a sample of Swedish municipalities. And what we wanted to look for is if we could try to explain how municipalities' sustainability reports had developed over time. And we started up with the time period 2015 to 2019. And we had as a special focus that we wanted to find out how are the SDGs used in sustainability reporting by Swedish municipalities. So, and in addition to that, we also included in this exercise looking at, well, what other standards may they be referring or using in their reporting. We also had as a purpose to distinguish whether they did only narrative reporting on either on standards, using certain standards, or particularly on the SDGs, or if they also embedded the use of indicators and measurements in their reporting. So just see, go one back. Okay, so that was, so I have 2 slides here. This is to get into that. And I think actually in Carol's presentations, we've now been introduced to the voluntary standards that are particularly relevant for the public sector. I want to just very briefly touch on the non-financial reporting directive that we have in the European Union. In essence, it requires large public entities to disclose non-financial information and diversity information, and that applies to entities of more than 500 staff, for example. So in some countries in Europe, in Italy, for example, some municipalities have chosen to use the European directive as a reporting framework for their sustainability reporting. Then we have a host of voluntary standards, and we saw the GRI and the TCFD, and of course the integrated reporting framework. We saw those touched upon in Carol's previous presentation. So to try to visualize this cliff between mandatory and voluntary reporting, not to say that mandatory reporting is the solution, but finding some form of common benchmark or common framework where some reporting becomes formalized as mandatory could create a positive shift that's illustrated with this sheep photo that you see here, that if you have only voluntary reporting, you could have most organizations illustrated as the sheep being more towards being black, while the one doing voluntary reporting sticks out as the white sheep. While if you change and shift a little bit more to some form of mandatory frameworks, you could have the opportunity to shift more towards the other picture that you see in this slide with a white sheep and only one sheep then standing out, potentially not following the mandatory requirements. So this figure here I have adapted from another study, Niemann et al., published in 2018, and they created a framework for trying to empirically capture sustainability reporting in local governments. And I've drawn an arrow here, and that is to say that the method we applied in this study was really to look at the content of a smaller sample of sustainability reports of municipalities in Sweden. So then there's other blocks that can be studied as well, context and process and so forth. But just to say that my limitation here is really at this point a content analysis. So more specifically, we collected 5 municipalities' external sustainability reporting, and we analyzed their reports published from 2015 to 2019. We coded it. So far, the coding has actually been done in Excel, and it's now being moved into a separate software called NVivo to be able to make the coding slightly more advanced. We've looked at, do the municipalities have separate sustainability reporting, yes or no? That has actually was with the first exercise we did to select those that had reports. We also considered the length of the reports to get an idea of is the amount of reporting increasing. And then we come into the perhaps more interesting aspects. What standards are they referring to in their reporting? Which SDGs are they reporting on, and how are they reporting, or how are they using the SDGs for reporting? So narrative versus measurements. And these questions here were driven by a wish to understand whether these reports accommodate consistency and comparability in sustainability data. And then at the end, I'm going to touch on this phase 2 that we're starting up here in October. So here you see the total amount of municipalities in Sweden. And please bear in mind that here we're looking for standalone sustainability reports issued as an external sustainability report. So these numbers that you see here does not mean that they do not have any sustainability reporting. They do have a lot of them on their websites and so forth, but we look specifically for the separate report. And in 2019, there were 12 municipalities who did a standalone report, and only 6 of those had 2 reports in a row, so to speak. So we've actually seen in our data that report formats have changed over the last 5 years. I'm going to show you that. So here you see a selection of the 5 municipalities where we've been able to dive in more explicitly to their reports. Here you see the time span by year, and we just wanted to get an overview of pages. And you can see here that there's in essence 2 camps. There's some that fill 100 and plus sides, and then you have the other ones who are less than 50 pages or just around 50 pages. Some of this interest was also triggered by a report, and now we get a little bit of a lesson in Swedish perhaps. The title could perhaps be translated to say that we can do better. And the focus was on municipalities' work with sustainability. So the report per se does not focus explicitly on reporting, but focuses on what we call sustainability work. And what that report shows is that all municipalities are engaging, but the speed at which they're engaging is quite varied, and it seems to be just picking up. A summarized table of what we found, and I marked the SDGs in red. This was to see, we coded the reports available to see what standards were they using over time. And what we could see was, you could look in the first one, they used what we refer to as triple bottom line. I'm going to show you an example. And from that, they shift into an SDG structure for their reporting. 2019 not released. Some municipalities make their own reporting model based on a triple bottom line modality. And others we find are using GRI, and some are now shifting, like this one, shifting from GRI to an SDG focus, and perhaps not yet knowing about the combination, not knowing how to combine the standards to make their sustainability reports. Again, a shift towards SDG. So the pattern we see here is in all of them, once we got 2018, 2019, they were all working with, to some extent, the SDGs and their sustainability reporting. Now I'm going to show you a snapshot from two selected municipalities. And here you will see, this is actually same version as you saw on the other one, just pulling this specific municipality out. And you will see in 2018, you see the year shown here, that they reported on 15 out of the 17 SDGs. And they actually indirectly reported on the SDGs in 2017, but we coded for explicit use of SDGs, and the explicit use only came into the report in 2018. But the subject areas remained largely the same. So how did that particular municipality work with the use of measurements versus narratives? And we saw this particular municipality, for each of the SDGs that they reported on by the time we got to 2018, 2019, they were having measurements, indicators used for all of those SDGs. Oh, there we go. So what do I mean when I say that they are changing from triple bottom line to using SDGs to structure their reporting? This is an example here. And again, please forgive, it's in Swedish, but I actually took a screen print I thought was interesting to see. This is their 2017 report, and you see the section 4.1 corresponds to the same section a year later. So here we have the triple bottom line, the social, the environmental, and the economic. Those same areas are now in 2018 captured by, here you see the SDG 1 through 17. Another municipality, same kind of exercise, where we found that this municipality again has been working with the SDGs, explicitly reporting on them during 2018 and 2019. But you see the coverage here is limited to, in 2018, 9 SDGs and 2019, 10 SDGs. They moved from doing an integrated report in 2017 and moved to the separate sustainability report 2018-2019. Oh. In this particular municipality, we saw a slightly different view when we compared narratives versus measurements. And you see that here they are not a 50-50, but 60-40 distribution between text and narrative. So slightly less use of measurements for this particular municipality. Another example of the use here, they moved from a GRI focus driving the report to an SDG driven report. And you will also see again a shift in the SDGs that they cover in their sustainability reports. They've been consistent on doing separate sustainability reports since 2015. So what can we extrapolate from these findings? We can see that sustainability reporting in the form of a separate sustainability report is not yet a widespread practice, rather the opposite. And here I'm talking about a standalone or an integrated report. Sustainability reporting practices vary in a number of ways. They vary in the type of the report. They vary in terms of where they place information on sustainability. The use of voluntary standards, we see a variation here as well. We can observe in the pilot that there is a tendency to change among the standards used. And I'm going to get into what that changing around between standards or even SDGs from year to year, that poses challenges for comparability. We also see that the extent of use of indicators and measurements also vary from municipality to municipality, where some are using it measurements heavily and others are more leaning towards a narrative presentation. And then we also see large variations in the general form and presentation of data and information in the reports. So what are the challenges with what the data is telling us? Well, one is it does pose challenges for comparability. It poses challenges in consistencies. And these two challenges could indicate that some form of mandatory reporting or common framework used by all would be beneficial to be able to support those two pillars of comparability and consistency. And also I want to add that advancing the integrated reporting and the integrated thinking to see a closer integration between the financial capitals and the other capitals we have in non-financial reporting. So the phase 2 is removing the data into a separate coding system to do a more detailed analysis of the narratives and the content of the measurements and indicators. And we're extending the study to also Danish municipalities. And we're hoping in the spring of 2021 to extend the study to do also qualitative data collection so that we can see the interlinks between external reporting and the targets we see here with internal implementation and performance measurement, so that we ultimately, as Carol mentioned at the end of her presentation, can get to the point of having a meaningful debate of the overall sustainability development, where the public sector has a very important role to play. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was excellent. I'm just going to give there's a question from Mo Baines, and I think it's something that we discussed as well, about linking your further research in the Danish municipalities beyond those borders. He's saying the question is, the speed in the UK is also showing a lot of differences, including targets. Is there any commonality with the French and Swedish models about what and how they collect to ensure good comparative information?
So the question, what they do have is, actually, can I just make sure that I understood the question correctly?
I think he's asking about in order to collect the information in a way that you ensure that comparability across jurisdictions can be ensured.
Well, I mean, one idea could be, and I think that's what we see that they're working on in the private sector, is that there could be some form of commonality of selected indicators, whether it's 10 or 5 or 15, and that it's some form of an agreement to say that in the public sector, these are the ones that, for example, all the municipalities would seek to report on, to then that create that framework where you have a common benchmark to create consistency and comparability.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please continue.
No, I just wanted to say, of course, when we are in the public sector and we are in the area of sustainability reporting, variations will be interesting. More variations could be interesting in a different way from financial reporting, because I say, if I look at Sweden as an example, the municipalities differ so much in nature, and the environmental challenges could differ very much from the north to the south. But still, it would be very meaningful with that common framework to establish some form of comparability.
Thank you. There are other questions, but I'm going to hold them until the question and answer session at the end, and I'll bring some of them forward. So thank you very much. I'd like to move on, if I may, to Katarina Bryan from the European Court of Auditors. So she's kindly agreed to take part in the presentation, and at this stage she's also a member. She works for the Swedish member of the European Court of Auditors, and she's involved in the strategic engagement of the European Court of Auditors and in actually supervising audits, and her passion for sustainability, climate change, I'm sure will come through in the presentation. And she's previously also been a lecturer in the area of European Union programs. So Katarina, over to you, if I may.
Well, thank you very much, Khalid. Thank you very much for this invitation. So I'm just going to check whether you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, great. Because I'm just going to warn you, I've had some connection problems. And you might think, well, I'm working for the Swedish member, and just we had a presentation on Sweden now. Well, this is actually a coincidence, which I was very happy about, because I think, you know, this previous presentation was very interesting for me. But perhaps it's not a coincidence, because the member I work for was actually in a state secretary before she joined the court, and was in charge of bringing sustainability reporting to the state-owned enterprises in Sweden. So I think it was interesting that you looked at the municipalities, and it might be, you know, it's also a sign, I think, where Sweden is, perhaps. Now, let me start with my presentation. I'm going to present to you today our work on reporting on sustainability. And we did a review in 2019, and it's the first time we took a broader perspective on the SDGs. and the Agenda 2030. We've been doing a lot in the areas of climate, environment, and energy already, but this was really sort of the first broader perspective on the SDGs. And I think for us it was only natural. The EU has been a driving focus and force in the area. And perhaps I'm stating the obvious here, but it was right, and it is right now, to focus on sustainable development. Now, this was actually the introduction I gave around 1 year ago, because we said it was then right to focus on development. We've had the climate marches and a new commission. And well, with COVID, I think it matters so much more. But will it matter? Because, you know, it was very important, and we said it's already the right time to focus. Well, I think it is still, and even more the time, to talk about sustainability reporting in the public sector. And I think as well, I'll come to this later, we have a unique opportunity on the European frontier with the recovery packages. Now, let me come to our audit. And well, to be precise, it was a review. Our question was, simply put, is the European Union and the EU institutions leading by example? Well, with the starting points, you're very familiar. You know, EU member states are committed to the SDGs. We have the directive, which we've already talked about. Well, it doesn't actually apply, as we've heard, to the public institutions, and it also doesn't apply to EU institutions. But still, you could expect that EU institutions are leading by example. And you might ask, well, what's the European Court of Auditors doing here? Well, we realized that, you know, there's a need to talk about the information on sustainability, which the stakeholders requests, and how the Commission reports on that. There's a lot happening in the private sector, and there are questions raised about the credibility of information, and that's where we come in. Now, with these starting points, our main review question was, what is the status of reporting on the achievement of the SDGs at EU level? And how do individual EU institutions and agencies report? Now, I should say that we are looking at the EU budget. This is our mandate as Court of Auditors, and we are not looking at what the EU member states are doing individually with their national budgets. So what has the Commission done, or perhaps better to say what it has not done? Now, we found that there is no strategy on SDGs on a European level. There was at that time, you might remember, the reflection paper. But I have to say that this conclusion might change now because, well, we've had the Green Deal, which the Commission says is, you know, their implementation of SDGs. But, well, the Court of Auditors hasn't audited this yet, so I can't comment. Well, what is there is the so-called Eurostat report. And Carly, I would just ask you, could you take over the controls because the connection seems a bit slow? And
just tell me to go.
Yeah, okay, great. So you can click once more. So we've got the Eurostat report. And some of you might be familiar, but this actually doesn't report or measure the contribution of the EU budget or EU policy to achieving SDGs. It is more like, where are the member states standing, regardless of what the EU budget is doing or not. Now, we've also seen, as the Court of Auditors, we examine regularly the performance reporting. And we found there's no reporting on contribution of EU budget and policies to achieving SDGs. And I have to say, apart from one area, and this is external action. And you might ask yourself, well, this is perhaps not a coincidence because, well, they've had to deal with the Millennium Goals, so they were perhaps a bit already more familiar. Now, if we move on to the individual reporting, and we covered, you can just click through the slides. Yeah, that's fine. And we have covered 12 institutions and 41 agencies. Now, out of these 53 bodies, 2 publish sustainability reports, which is the European Investment Bank and the European Intellectual Property Office. And again, you know, it's interesting to see it's the bank, and they are certainly, you know, were more precious to do so. And the European Intellectual Property Office is a small but largely financed agency. So again, it's a bit different. What do the others do? Well, perhaps it's similar to what has been found in Sweden. Is the others do publish information, but it's incomplete and piecemeal. And it often focuses on running of the organization. You know, how much paper do you use? Rather than how sustainability is integrated in strategy in their activities. So if we go on, why is it? Well, we did a survey, and the key reasons for not presenting sustainability reports is actually, well, simply, they haven't considered it yet. So this is why I think it's important to hold webinars like this, and I'm grateful to SIP for doing this, because I think we are still in need of raising awareness. We have also asked, you know, so it's basically, it doesn't consider it, but actually there is something else which doesn't show here, is that the prerequisites are not in place. So for meaningful reporting, you know, you need to have a strategy. You need to have an integration of SDGs into the budget. You know, the reporting and the report comes at the end, and you might have, you know, a nice outcome is a glossy brochure, but it's really the whole process which needs to happen before you can have, you know, a nice brochure. So if we move on, this was the result of the 2019 report. And let me just say a few words on the future. And you are aware that, you know, there's been an unprecedented European response with the new MFF and what's called the Next Generation EU. And this is where it gets interesting, because, you know, that's happening right now. And I wonder how much we can, as auditors and practitioners, academics, influence how this money is going to be spent. Let's go to the next slide. The European Court of Auditors has published some what we call opinions on the Commission's proposals. Now, to the Just Transition Fund, and if you want to be precise, that was already in the Green Deal, we found that, well, common indicators do not clearly capture the objective to the transition out of carbon-intensive sectors. That means that, in simple terms, there's not enough, or, you know, no common indicators, which means common means across the EU, which covers the transition. Now, if such the case, and this is the case, it's going to be very difficult to say at the end, well, the Just Transition Fund has contributed to this transition. The other big opinion which might be of interest to you is the opinion on the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is really the big money pot of loans and grants. Now here we found that, well, there's neither quantification of the exact expected results at EU level, nor an allocation of funds to different objectives. This applies not just to being green, but, you know, we always talk about these twin transition green transition goals of digitalization and green, but also to other goals which are relevant for SDGs, for example, the social transition. What is clear, without common indicators which are applied across countries and a common methodology, it will be difficult to monitor and for us to audit the spending. And we also said that the plans that the member states need to come up with now, how they're going to spend this money, the so-called national recovery and resilience plans, they are key. So I think it will be very interesting to see how these are formulated, what they contain, and this would be a good opportunity both on national level with, for example, supreme audit institutions looking at that, practitioners, but also us. Now I think, and perhaps move to the next slide. We're still facing 4 major challenges, and these are the ones which we had in our original one. Well, developing an EU strategy post-2020 that covers SDGs and sustainability. How far does the Green Deal go? We haven't audited it yet. How far does the integrating sustainability and SDGs into the EU budget and performance framework go? We're going to publish in a few weeks our first sort of complete performance report, and there's a few bits and pieces there which might be interesting for you. Well, how far are we with developing sustainability reporting in EU institutions and agencies? And the fourth point I want to highlight is that you can use auditors to increase the credibility of sustainability reporting. And I think this is key. And when I see the pie chart about governance, I think we could also think about how this governance and how external auditors can support the credibility in this. And there, I know for the public sector, people and auditors are getting really interesting. But then, there's at the same time cautious, because it is not as easy for auditors to audit sustainability reporting, and we can talk about that more. But for me, and this is just to conclude, I think there's an opportunity for us, and there's an opportunity for auditors, and I think we should make sure that the good intentions, lead to tangible results. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katarina. Just one question from my side, going back to what you were saying about the prerequisites not in place in the survey, which I thought was quite revealing. Were there some ideas about why the prerequisites are not in place to start this reporting on SDGs?
Well, I think it is probably not just the awareness, but also because there is the EU institutions were not mandated or do not have an obligation to report on sustainability. While you had for the companies, you have the non-financial reporting sector directive, but this doesn't apply for EU institutions. This is one reason. The other one, the strategy process in the EU and on a more global level is quite long. So you had the Europe 2020 goals, then you got the sustainability goals, you had Paris, and only now we have the new Green Deal. So it overlaps a bit. There's overlapping of periods, which is difficult.
Right.
And I think it's.
Please, I just, I think that's quite clear, but it's just the picture in my mind was the sheep picture that Carolyn put forward. So because we don't have to do it, it's unlikely we get compliance.
Yes and no. I think they're already, although there's no obligation, they're already, some, reporting on results on climate action. Yeah, we have audited that as well, and we found huge, well, overestimation, let's put it like that, of what the Commission says is spent on climate. So there's some reporting, but specifically to the SDGs as such, this is still lacking apart from external action.
Thank you for that. I'm going to now start the general discussion for the last 30 minutes or so. So I think at this stage we'll have all the presenters on the screen. I think if I ask our technical people to help with that. And as we're starting to do that, I just got the first question for Carol, actually.
Do I need to hit the button? Share my webcam?
I think it's going to be done automatically. There you go. So the first question is from Sandra, and I hope I pronounced your surname right, Worth, to Carol. What resources would you recommend management consultants who want to help the public sector or enterprises to implement the SDGs? Ideally, such resources would favour a holistic approach by ensuring that all dimensions are taken care of, especially the governance and strategy ones, and of course, they should be hands-on. So there's an easy question for Carol to start with.
Oh, well, of course, I would say the SDGs recommendations. I think that reporting against them, and we've heard that a lot of public sector organisations are using the SDGs as a reporting framework, but reporting against the SDGs recommendations also helps organisations develop their internal processes, because effectively the reporting is on those important processes, the management approach, the governance oversight, for example. And so using those is key. And I would also advise you to look out for the SDG impact standards for enterprises that the UNDP SDG impact team will put out in November.
Thank you. I realised we've only got actually about 10 minutes to go. I was wrong. We've only got an hour theoretically. It's so enthralling. It's gone so quickly. I'm going to ask a general question to all three of you, if I may. What I'm hearing, if I take a snapshot of what you've all said, is that, look, in 2015, when the MDGs were over, one of the first things that they said was we need monitoring and we need evaluation, because that was lacking in the MDG process. And we're in 2020, and I'm hearing that no one's really got that emphasis on reporting on SDGs 5 years on, to the extent that we'd like, partly because of your sheet slide, which will be the overriding memory of this presentation from me, Carolyn. But with that idea in mind, the two questions I want to sort of bring into it is what can we do to accelerate this compliance or this reporting? And in terms of what Mo Brains was saying as well, how do we make sure we bring a common framework? I think your presentations all have alluded to the need for some kind of standardization of frameworks, and my concern is that the frameworks we have to outlast 2030 as well, I presume. We don't want a framework to then be updated after 2030, because there's another thing. So it's, the old adage that if you can't achieve a goal by 2030, then just move the target to 2040. So I think just in the light of that kind of frame of reference, can you sort of give your vision for what you'd like to see going forward, and what the key elements are that we need to bring this to the table to make it implementable? I'll just go in the order on my screen. Katarina, do you want to have a first stab?
Well, I think to have a complete picture on the reporting, what is happening and what is not happening, I think we should also consider the voluntary national reports which have to go to the UN. And we haven't analyzed that. I've heard, they're quite different. Not just, these happen at different stages. They happen in different years. So this is one to consider as well. On the question, well, there's actually been another common. There's several initiatives that I've noticed now to have more common frameworks, yeah. And I think EFRA, which is from the a committee sponsored by the European Commission started on perhaps coming up with some common standards. But I think, as far as I know, the Commission hasn't decided yet on whether to take that on board in the new NRFR. For me, personally, I just think anything common should be simple and should not be complicated, and should encourage people just to get started with reporting. And it doesn't have to be perfect at the first time or the second time, to just simple and emphasize that reporting is a process, and what it was very much said by the previous two speakers.
Right, thank you. And so, Carolyn, on that line, and based on your slides, is the integrated reporting, the triple bottom line, and the SDGs, is this an evolution, or would you see it in that way, or how do you see it? What's your view of this world?
Well, I think it certainly is an evolution. And I think as an educator, it's almost hard to keep up with the number of standards and frameworks that are coming out. And I think also alluding to what Katarina said about the directive, it's also undergoing or will undergo a revision following the consultation they had during the summer. And what I've understood from the outcome of that consultation is that stakeholders, and this is all private sector stakeholders as well, saying that they would like some more direction even in the directive. And it was alluding towards a more tight connection with the TCDF, so the climate disclosures. And I sometimes feel for those also, the preparers of these reports, as I showed you with that Swedish example, where they've moved from the structuring it through the triple bottom line concept or that modality to the SDGs. And then if standards are changing again, so it's also, I think, about having the resources to also educate at the speed of these. So I think I very much agree with Katarina, something meaningful that can be linked to sustainable development, and something simple. I know the Danish auditors for the private sector, not public sector, they developed a guide for 15 key ratios on that, based on that concept, simplicity and meaningfulness in terms of impact.
Thank you. And Carol, and just on the thing in terms of the frameworks you're designing and some of the tools we can use, like again, I always go back to the materiality of what's simple, but also what's understandable and meaningful at the same time. It's a very hard balancing act with such a sophisticated amount of elements. So what's your thinking of the direction of travel, Carol, on all of this?
Well, I think things need to change. That's the critical thing. Organisations need to transform and change. And look, I think accountants have a really important role in this. Accounting provides information for decision makers. And I think if every SIPFA member thought about the information that they were providing for decision making and really thought, am I providing enough information for a decision to be made that's going to make a positive contribution to the SDGs? That is really what's needed. Every time you're providing that information, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're looking beyond the financial, beyond the economic, and that as accountants, we're allowing decision makers to do that. Because change is needed. We can't carry on operating, working, delivering services and so on the way we are doing it now.
So the closer connection between the service delivery and the unit on which we do our work in terms of the financial management needs to be clearer.
Well, I guess we need to think about, what information we're providing for decision making. That's what accountants do. What information is being collected? Is it the right information in order to make decisions about capital investment projects, for example? You know, is there sufficient information on the sustainability implications and impact of all the capital investment decisions and project decisions that are being made? That would be you know, that would be a number one thing. When you're developing a strategy, a lot of accountants are involved in developing strategy. Is it a strategy where you've thought about and incorporated sustainable development risks and opportunities? Have you systematically gone through those material sustainable development risks and also opportunities that impact on the work of your organization, and have you incorporated them into strategy?
I think that's clear. So it's not on the side. It's not after the fact. It's right in the heart of the process, and it has to be embedded in there. And I think that's a key message, because then everything else will come out of it naturally, rather than in other ways. I think there's a lot of thinking still to be done in this area. I'm going to go around one more time for any final comments from the three panelists and say thank you all very much, and I'm very grateful for the time you've afforded us as a SIPFA here, and to say that I'm also hoping that this could spark another few conversations of this kind. So and the broadcast will be made available on our website, and it's so people can come and listen to it, and other people can gain insights from some of this excellent work. So I think Katarina, any final thoughts, comments, ideas?
No, I just wanted to thank you very much. I hope it's the start of a conversation, and perhaps for the next conversation, perhaps next time, we could also show accountants and discuss a bit more really on the financial accounts, that it already makes an impact. For example, traditional questions such as depreciation of buildings will need to take into account climate change, because building won't be sustainable for 20, 30 years, whatever your standard is now. So I think this is, you know, talking about non-financial information, but also financial implications. And now Ipsos is also currently working on some standards. So I think that might be another way to complement.
Right, that's interesting. Carolyn, just any final thoughts, comments? I see you're starting your next project next month, so it'll be fascinating to keep abreast of that.
I got to run so that I can manage, right? No, I will say with an educator's hat on now that I am so pleased to see students starting to really ask questions. And even in traditional accounting, they're starting to challenge us, asking us, why are you teaching us a balance sheet with only financial capital? I had a student ask last week, never heard those types of questions 2 years ago. I also just want to take 1 second and thank 2 students, Sylvia Johannik and Angela Arian, who have assisted in collecting data for the work we did in Sweden. And again, alluding to the interest of students in this topic as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We thank them as well for having the opportunity to see that. And finally, Carol, any final comments and thoughts?
Well, no, just a request really that everybody goes away and thinks about what change they can make to help contribute to sustainable development through the work that they do.
Well, I can't really add to that, and I think that's a perfect way to finish this session. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of the day, and thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.